Salesperson laughs at Eric Trump in dealership. Didn't know who he was. The September sun hadn't fully risen over Manhattan when Mike Ramirez pulled into his usual parking spot at Manhattan Motors. The massive dealership's windows gleamed in the early morning light, reflecting the city skyline like mirrors. Inside those windows sat millions of dollars worth of luxury vehicles: Mercedes, Porsche, Bentley. Each one perfectly positioned under strategic lighting that made them look like artwork rather than automobiles. Mike sat in his 10-year-old Honda Accord for a moment, gathering his energy for another day of selling dreams to the wealthy. At 43, he wasn't old. But 15 years of standing on marble floors and chasing commission checks had begun to wear on him. He checked his reflection in the rearview mirror, adjusting his red tie, chosen carefully because studies showed red ties increased sales performance. His black hair was starting to gray at the temples, but his daughter Emma insisted it made him look distinguished. "Another day in paradise," he muttered, grabbing his worn leather briefcase from the passenger seat. It had been a gift from his wife Maria 5 years ago, and though he could afford something newer, it felt like a good luck charm now. The back entrance beeped as he swiped his keycard. Inside, the maintenance crew was just finishing their morning routine, polishing surfaces that were already spotless, ensuring every vehicle gleamed like it had just rolled off the assembly line. "Morning, Mr. Ramirez," called out Joey, the 19-year-old who handled the morning cleaning. The kid was saving up for community college, reminding Mike of his own start in the business. "Joey, my man, those windows looking good?" "Yes, sir. Extra shine today. Got a feeling it's going to be busy." Mike smiled, remembering when he used to have that kind of optimism about every day. "From your lips to God's ears, kid. By the way, your mom's still looking for a new car?" "Yeah, but nothing fancy like these. Just something reliable, you know. Tell her to come see me at the end of the month. I might know someone over at the Honda place who can help out." These were the moments Mike lived for. The real human connections that somehow survived in this temple of wealth and status. He made his way to the break room, where the morning crew was gathered around the coffee machine. The familiar scent of burned coffee filled the air, mixing with the lingering smell of leather and new car interiors. "I'm telling you, it's going to happen," Sarah was saying as Mike walked in. She was the newest sales associate, just 6 months on the floor, but already developing the thick skin needed for luxury car sales. "The market's going to crash. My brother works in finance, and he says—" "Your brother said the same thing last year," Tom interrupted, stirring his coffee with unnecessary vigor. "And the year before that. Meanwhile, we keep selling more cars at higher prices." Mike grabbed his usual mug, a chipped ceramic thing with "World's Best Dad" painted on it by Emma when she was 8. "Morning, kids. What are we arguing about today?" "Sarah's predicting the end of the world again." Lisa chimed in from her perch on the counter. At 62, she was the dealership's top seller, proving that in this business, experience and people skills mattered more than anything else. "Not the end of the world," Sarah defended herself. "Just saying we should be prepared. The rich aren't going to keep buying forever." Mike poured his coffee, adding 2 sugars out of habit. "They've been buying since before any of us were born, and they'll be buying long after we're gone. That's the one thing you can count on in this business." The morning meeting was its usual blur of numbers and quotas. David Chen, the general manager, stood at the front of the conference room with his iPad, cycling through slides of sales targets and manufacturer incentives. Mike half listened while checking his messages. Emma needed money for a school trip, Maria was running late at her new bakery again, and his mother wanted to know when he'd fix her printer. "And finally," David said, catching everyone's attention with his serious tone, "corporate's pushing hard on the G-Wagon allocations. We've got 5 black ones coming in next week, and they want them all pre-sold. Commission structure is very attractive." He paused for effect. Very attractive. The room buzzed with energy. G-Wagons were the current status symbol of choice, selling well above MSRP to people who didn't blink at paying extra to skip the waiting list. "I've got a hedge fund guy who's been asking about one," Tom said quickly. "Real estate developer on my list too," Lisa added. Mike stayed quiet. He had a few prospects, but nothing solid. These vehicles were a different game, less about the product and more about the privilege of being allowed to buy one. Back on the floor, the morning started slow. Mike spent an hour updating his client database, making notes about follow-up calls and potential leads. He watched a young couple circle the new S-Class, clearly in love with the car but just as clearly not ready for the price tag. He didn't approach. Experience had taught him to read body language, and theirs screamed, "Just looking." "You see the guy in the Maserati this morning?" Tom asked, sidling up to Mike's desk. "Tried to trade it in, but it's got more miles than my grandmother's Buick." Mike laughed. "They always think depreciation doesn't apply to them. Remember that guy last week? Wanted full price for a 3-year-old Bentley with coffee stains on the seats?" Speaking of coffee, Tom nodded toward Mike's empty mug. "Want a real one? I'm heading across the street to Giovanni's." "God, yes. This breakroom stuff is killing me slowly." The Italian cafe, across from the dealership, had become their unofficial second office. Giovanni himself greeted them as they walked in, already reaching for their usual orders. "Ah, my favorite car sellers. Business good?" "Can't complain," Mike replied, inhaling the aroma of properly brewed espresso. "How's your daughter doing at NYU?" Giovanni beamed with pride. "Top of her class. She says maybe law school next. I tell her, you want to be lawyer? Better you take over cafe. Less crazy." They laughed, but Mike felt a twinge in his chest. Emma was starting to look at colleges, and, even with his good income, the numbers were daunting. Private school might be out of reach, unless he had a few exceptional months. Back at the dealership, Mike noticed a small commotion by the front entrance. A black Suburban had pulled up, and the security guard was unusually alert. Mike had seen enough VIP arrivals to recognize the signs. Someone important was about to walk through those doors. "Heads up," Lisa murmured as she passed his desk. "Could be interesting." Mike straightened his tie and checked his breath. Years of experience had taught him to be ready for anything in this business. Rich people, celebrities, politicians, they all eventually needed cars, and they all wanted to be treated like they were the most important person in the room. The glass doors swished open, letting in a burst of September air. Mike looked up, client smile already in place, ready for whatever the day might bring. A man in his late 30s entered, flanked by what appeared to be a personal assistant who was frantically typing on his phone. The man's suit was expensive, but fit oddly, like it had been bought off the rack and never properly tailored. His hair was what caught Mike's attention first, styled in a peculiar way that seemed to defy both fashion and nature. "I'll handle this one," Mike said quietly to Sarah, who was moving to approach the customers. She nodded, retreating to her desk with visible relief. New salespeople often felt intimidated by clients who arrived with entourages. Mike gave the customers a moment to acclimate to the showroom. It was a trick Lisa had taught him years ago. Let them take in the atmosphere, feel the luxury seep into their bones. The assistant was still absorbed in his phone, but the primary customer was already moving purposefully toward the SUV section. "Good morning, gentlemen," Mike said, approaching with measured steps. "Welcome to Manhattan Motors." The man barely glanced at him. "Your G-Wagons, where are they?" Mike maintained his professional smile despite the abrupt greeting. "Of course, sir. We have several G-Class models available. Are you looking for any specific trim level?" "The best one," the man replied, his tone suggesting this should have been obvious. "Black on black. I don't want to see anything else." The assistant finally looked up from his phone. "Mr. Trump prefers to focus on exactly what he wants." Mike's brain took a moment to process the name. The man's features suddenly clicked into place, the resemblance to his father, the familiar way he held himself. But something in Mike, perhaps 15 years of dealing with pretenders and wannabes, couldn't quite accept it. "Trump?" Mike chuckled, the sound escaping before he could catch it. "You know, we get a lot of people in here claiming to be somebody famous." The assistant's jaw dropped. The customer, who Mike was starting to realize might actually be Eric Trump, turned slowly to face him, color rising in his cheeks. "Excuse me?" Eric's voice carried that particular tone of someone unused to being questioned. "Did you just laugh at me?" Mike's professional instinct screamed at him to backtrack, but something else, maybe the memory of every entitled customer who'd ever talked down to him, maybe the absurdity of the moment, made him continue. "Just last week," Mike heard himself saying, "I had a guy in here swearing up and down he was Leonardo DiCaprio's personal shopper. Even had a fake business card and everything." The assistant was now frantically making calls, stepping away from what was quickly becoming a scene. Other customers in the showroom had started to notice, and Mike could see phones being raised to record what was happening. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Eric's voice had risen slightly. "Do you know who my father is?" And that's when Mike made the biggest mistake of his career. He laughed again. This time, it was a genuine laugh. The kind that comes from deep in your belly when something is just too ridiculous to process. Later, he would try to explain to David that it wasn't political, wasn't personal. It was just that in that moment, the whole situation seemed like a comedy sketch come to life. "Sir," Mike managed, trying to get his laughter under control, "if you're really interested in a G-Wagon, I'd be happy to." "I'm Eric Trump." The man cut him off, his face now a shade of red that clashed dramatically with his pale blue tie. "Son of the President of the United States. And you're standing there laughing at me like this is some kind of joke?" It was in that exact moment, as the words hung in the air and the showroom fell silent, except for the soft whir of phones recording, that Mike finally, truly realized this wasn't a prank or a case of mistaken identity. He was indeed looking at Eric Trump, and he had just laughed, twice, in the man's face. The professional smile slipped from Mike's face as the gravity of the situation sank in. 15 years of career building, of carefully cultivated client relationships and stellar performance reviews, might have just gone up in smoke because he couldn't contain his laughter at what he thought was another fake celebrity encounter. Around them, the dealership had gone eerily quiet. Even the usual background music seemed to have faded away, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Mike could see Lisa watching from her desk, her expression a mixture of horror and fascination. Sarah had disappeared entirely, probably seeking cover in the break room. "Mr. Trump," Mike started, his voice now deadly serious. "I sincerely apologize for my unprofessional behavior. But it was too late. Eric Trump was already pulling out his phone, his fingers jabbing at the screen with barely contained fury. The assistant had returned, speaking rapidly into his own device about disrespect and immediate action. Mike stood rooted to the spot, watching as his career imploded in real time. All he could think about was Emma's college tuition, Maria's newly opened bakery, the mortgage payments that wouldn't care about viral videos or mistaken identity. "I want to speak to whoever runs this place," Eric demanded, his voice carrying across the showroom. "Now." That's when this guy walked in. He looked kind of weird, like someone trying too hard to look important. His suit didn't fit right, and his hair was slicked down in this strange way that made Mike think of a kid trying to dress up like his dad. "Can I help you?" Mike asked, not really caring about the answer. The man strutted around like he was God's gift to the world. "Yeah, show me your best G-Wagon. Black one." Mike couldn't help it. He laughed. The guy just seemed so fake, like all those other wannabes who came in pretending to be somebody. "Sure thing, buddy. You know these things cost more than most houses, right?" That's when the man's face turned red. "I'm Eric Trump, you know, the president's son." Mike laughed again, harder this time. He'd heard it all before, people claiming to be celebrities or their kids or their cousins. "Yeah, and I'm Santa Claus," he said, rolling his eyes. David Chen's office had always felt like a sanctuary to Mike. Over 15 years, he'd celebrated record sales months here, received promotions, and weathered the occasional customer complaint. But now, sitting in one of the leather guest chairs, while Eric Trump's voice boomed through the closed door, it felt more like an execution chamber. "This is completely unacceptable." Eric's voice carried clearly through the supposedly soundproof walls. "Do you have any idea what kind of business we could have brought you?" Mike could hear David's lower, calmer responses, but couldn't make out the words. His phone buzzed again, the 20th time in the last 10 minutes. He glanced at the screen. Maria calling. His stomach twisted into an even tighter knot. What was he going to tell her? The door opened, and David's assistant Rachel poked her head in. "Mike? Mr. Chen would like you to join them now." Her usually friendly face was a mask of professional neutrality, but her eyes held sympathy. Mike stood, straightening his tie one last time. It felt like walking to his own funeral. Inside the main office, Eric Trump was pacing behind one of the guest chairs, his face still flushed with anger. His assistant stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, speaking in hushed tones. David sat behind his desk, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the last hour. "Mike." David gestured to the empty chair. "Please sit down." "I prefer to stand," Eric interrupted before Mike could move. "This won't take long. I want him fired. Today. Now." Mike felt a surge of something, pride, maybe, or desperation, rise in his chest. "Mr. Trump, I want to apologize again. I honestly didn't." "Save it," Eric cut him off. "You think this is funny? You think laughing at me, humiliating me in public, is some kind of joke?" "No, sir, Do you know how many people are going to see this? It's probably already all over social media. Do you think anyone's going to want to buy cars from someone who openly mocks customers?" David cleared his throat. "Mr. Trump, I assure you we take this very seriously. Mike has been one of our top salespeople for 15 years. This is completely out of character for him." Then, he should have known better. Eric finally stopped pacing, planting both hands on the back of the chair. "I want him gone. And I want it done now, or I promise you, this dealership will regret it." The assistant stepped away from his phone call. "Sir, your father's office is aware of the situation. They're asking if you want to make a statement." Mike's heart sank even further. This wasn't just about his job anymore. This was becoming a media circus. He could already imagine the headlines, the social media posts, the endless commentary. "Mr. Trump," Mike tried one last time. "I have a family. A daughter about to start college. I've built my entire career here. Please." "Should have thought about that before you decided to make me into a joke," Eric snapped. "David, either he goes or I make some calls. Your choice." David looked at Mike, genuine regret in his eyes. "Mike, I need you to turn in your badge and keys. Effective immediately, you're suspended pending review." The word suspended hung in the air. Not fired, not yet. Mike clung to that sliver of hope like a drowning man to driftwood. "Rachel will escort you to clear out your desk," David continued. "We'll be in touch about next steps." Mike nodded numbly, reaching for his employee badge. His fingers felt thick and clumsy as he unpinned it from his lapel. 15 years, reduced to this moment. Outside the office, the showroom floor had transformed. News vans were already pulling up outside, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like mechanical flowers. The security team was struggling to keep photographers from pressing against the windows. "Mike," Lisa caught up to him as Rachel led him toward his desk. "This is insane. Let me talk to David. You know this isn't right." "Thanks, Lisa, but," Mike shook his head. "I don't think there's anything anyone can do right now." His desk looked different somehow, as if it already belonged to someone else. Family photos smiled up at him as he started emptying drawers. Emma's graduation from middle school, Maria cutting the ribbon at her bakery's opening, his parents' 40th anniversary party. "Do you want a box?" Rachel asked quietly. "I've got my briefcase," Mike replied. "It's not like I keep my life here." But even as he said it, he realized that wasn't true. 15 years of life had accumulated in these drawers. Coffee mugs, spare ties, thank you cards from satisfied customers. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was Emma. "Dad, why are you trending on Twitter?" Mike's hands started shaking so badly, he had to sit down. Rachel tactfully stepped away, giving him a moment of privacy. "Hey, princess," he answered, trying to keep his voice steady. "Dad, what's going on? There's all these videos, and people are saying you got fired, and—" "Emma, honey, it's complicated. I'll explain everything when I get home. Just don't read anything online, okay? Promise me?" There was a pause. "Are you okay?" The simple question nearly broke him. "I will be, baby. I will be." By the time he finished gathering his things, the scene outside had gotten worse. More news vans had arrived, and a small crowd of onlookers had gathered, phones raised. The story was spreading like wildfire. "We can take you out through the service entrance," Rachel offered. Mike looked at the chaos outside, then down at his briefcase full of 15 years of memories. "No," he decided. "I didn't do anything wrong. Not really. I'm not sneaking out of here like a criminal." "Mike," Tom caught him near the front doors. "This is crazy, man. Give it a day or two, it'll blow over. You know how these things go." But Mike wasn't so sure. This wasn't just another viral moment. This was the president's son, in an election year. This was his career, his family's future, all balanced on the edge of a knife because of a laugh. As he pushed through the front doors, the cameras turned toward him like hungry animals catching a scent. Microphones thrust forward, voices calling his name, questions overlapping into a wall of noise. "Mr. Ramirez, did you intentionally disrespect Eric Trump? Was this a political statement? Have you been fired? Do you regret laughing?" Mike kept walking, head high, grateful he'd parked in his usual spot close to the building. Behind him, he could hear the dealership's PR team trying to control the situation, their practice statements already spinning the story. In his car, finally alone, Mike allowed himself a moment to break. His forehead rested against the steering wheel as the events of the morning replayed in his mind. One laugh. That's all it had taken to potentially destroy everything he'd built. His phone buzzed yet again. This time it was a text from Maria. "Coming home. Don't watch the news. We'll figure this out together. I love you." Mike started his car, careful not to look at the news vans as he pulled out of the parking lot. Traffic on Fifth Avenue was its usual mess, but today it felt different. Every other driver seemed to be looking at him, though he knew that was probably paranoia. At a red light, he made the mistake of glancing at his phone again. The video was everywhere. Number dealership gate was trending. People were already choosing sides, some calling him a working-class hero, others demanding his head on a platter. His simple life had become a symbol in a culture war he wanted no part of. A horn honked behind him. The light had turned green. Mike put his phone away and focused on driving, trying to ignore the growing knot in his stomach. He had no idea how this would play out, but one thing was certain. His life would never be quite the same again. As he turned onto his street in Queens, Mike noticed a news van slowly cruising past his house. They'd found his address already. Of course they had. Everything was public these days. Nothing stayed private for long. He pulled into his driveway just as Maria's car rounded the corner. She'd left the bakery in the middle of the day, something she'd never done before, not even when she had the flu last winter. The sight of her jumping out of her car, still wearing her flour-dusted apron, finally broke something in him. "Mike!" She rushed to him as he stepped out of his car. "I saw the video. Are you okay?" He tried to answer, but couldn't find the words. Instead, he just held her, breathing in the familiar scent of vanilla and yeast that always clung to her clothes. "Let's get inside," she said softly, "before those vultures come back around." Their modest house, the one they'd stretched their budget to buy in a good school district, had never felt more like a fortress than it did at that moment. As soon as the door closed behind them, Mike felt his professional facade crumble completely. "I messed up, Maria. I messed up so bad." She led him to the kitchen, already reaching for the coffee maker, their family solution to every crisis. "Tell me everything. From the beginning." So he did. The whole ridiculous story spilled out, the entrance, the attitude, the laugh that changed everything. As he talked, Maria's expression shifted from concern to disbelief to something like suppressed amusement. "Don't you dare," Mike warned, seeing the corner of her mouth twitch. "I'm sorry," she said, not looking sorry at all. "But Mike, only you would accidentally laugh in Eric Trump's face and start a social media war." Despite everything, Mike felt a smile tugging at his own lips. When she put it that way, it did sound absurd. Their moment of levity was interrupted by Emma bursting through the front door. "Dad, have you seen what they're saying online? There are memes. Someone made a remix." "Emma." Maria's voice carried a warning tone. "What did your father say about staying off social media?" "But Mom, you don't understand. Some people are saying Dad's a hero. There's a GoFundMe already." Mike put his head in his hands. "Please tell me you're joking." "No, look!" Emma thrust her phone at them. Sure enough, someone had started a fundraiser. Support the car salesman who stood up to the elite. "This is a nightmare," Mike groaned. "I didn't stand up to anyone. I just laughed because I thought he was another fake celebrity wannabe." The kitchen fell silent as that sank in. Outside, another news van crept past their house. "What are we going to do?" Emma asked in a small voice. Mike looked at his daughter, his smart, beautiful daughter, who had her heart set on NYU. He looked at his wife, who had sunk their savings into opening her bakery just 6 months ago. He looked around their kitchen, with its new countertops they were still paying off. "We're gonna handle this," he said with more confidence than he felt. "I'm suspended, not fired. David's a good guy. He'll fight for me if he can. And if not, I've been selling cars for 20 years. Someone will hire me. Maria squeezed his hand. The bakery's doing well. We have savings, we'll figure it out. Emma hugged him suddenly, fiercely. I can go to community college first, Dad. Lots of people do that. No, Mike said firmly. No one's giving up their dreams because I couldn't keep a straight face. We'll figure this out. His phone buzzed again. David's number this time. Mike stared at it for a long moment before answering. Mike, we need to talk about tomorrow. David's voice sounded tired through the phone. The corporate office is involved now. They've called an emergency board meeting. Mike stepped into the living room, away from Emma's worried eyes. How bad is it, David? It's complicated. The video's everywhere. We've got protesters planning to show up tomorrow on both sides. Some supporting you, some demanding we fire you. The PR team is working overtime, but… David paused. Eric Trump's people are threatening legal action. Legal action? For what? Laughing? They're claiming intentional infliction of emotional distress, damage to reputation. Some other things our lawyers say won't stick. But Mike, that's not the real problem. They're pressuring our corporate partners. You know how this works? Nobody wants to be on the wrong side of a political firestorm. Mike sank into his favorite armchair, the one he usually sat in to watch Sunday football. What are you saying, David? I'm saying? David sighed heavily. I'm fighting for you. 15 years of perfect performance reviews, highest customer satisfaction ratings in the region. That counts for something. But I need you to lay low. No social media, no press statements, nothing. Let our PR team handle this. Through the window, Mike could see another news van parking across the street. Bit late for laying low, isn't it? Just stay home tomorrow. I'll call you after the board meeting. After hanging up, Mike walked back to the kitchen. Maria was stress baking, something she always did in crisis situations. The counter was already covered with cooling racks full of cookies. Emma, honey, Maria said without looking up from her mixing bowl. Go upstairs and do your homework. But Mom, now please. Once Emma was gone, Maria turned to Mike. How bad? Bad. Mike slumped into a kitchen chair. Corporate's involved. There's going to be protesters tomorrow, and apparently I'm being sued. Maria dropped her mixing spoon. Sued? For laughing? Welcome to America in 2025. Mike tried to smile but couldn't quite manage it. Remember when we thought the craziest thing that would happen this year was Emma getting her driver's license? A sharp knock at the front door made them both jump. Through the decorative glass panels, they could see the silhouette of someone holding what looked like a microphone. Mr. Ramirez, Channel 7 News. We'd love to get your side of the story. More voices joined in. Mr. Ramirez, was this a political statement? Did you know it was Eric Trump when you laughed? Are you part of any activist organizations? Maria's face hardened. She grabbed her phone and started dialing. I'm calling Joey. Joey was Maria's younger brother, a cop with the NYPD. 20 minutes later, he arrived in his patrol car, lights flashing. The news van scattered like pigeons. You really stepped in it this time, Hermano, Joey said as he came through the back door. You're all over the precinct group chat. Thanks for coming, Joey, Maria hugged her brother. These vultures won't leave us alone. Yeah, well, they better leave now unless they want parking tickets. Joey grabbed a cookie from the cooling rack. These are stress cookies, aren't they? You always bake when you're stressed. Mike's phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Lisa. Don't watch the news. It's a circus. But Mike, you should see your customer reviews. They're all coming to your defense. Every single one. Another text followed quickly. Even Mr. Peterson, you know, the grumpy guy with the Bentley? He just called the dealership to say if they fire you, he's taking his business elsewhere. For the first time since this nightmare began, Mike felt a tiny spark of hope. His customers, the ones he'd spent 15 years building relationships with, treating with respect, regardless of whether they bought a car or not, they were standing up for him. The moment was interrupted by Emma's shout from upstairs. Dad, you're on Tucker Carlson. Emma, Maria yelled back. What did we say about watching the news? It's not news, it's TikTok. Mike and Maria looked at each other, then both rushed upstairs. Emma was sitting on her bed, phone in hand, watching a clip of Tucker Carlson's outraged face next to the dealership video. "This is what the liberal elite really thinks of hard-working Americans," Tucker was saying. "They laugh in our faces, mock our success." "That's not even what happened," Mike protested. "I'm not some liberal elite, I sell cars for a living." "Oh, it gets better," Emma said, scrolling. "Rachel Maddow did a whole segment too. She's calling you a voice of the working class or something." Mike felt a headache coming on. "Great. I'm a symbol now. A symbol of what? I have no idea. But definitely a symbol." His phone buzzed yet again. Unknown number this time. Mike almost ignored it, but something made him answer. "Hello? Mr. Ramirez?" A smooth, professional voice. "This is Martin Klein from the Today Show. We'd love to have you on tomorrow morning to tell your side of the story. We can send a car, make all the arrangements." Mike hung up. The phone immediately rang again. Another unknown number. "The vultures are circling," Joey observed from the doorway. "You know what your problem is, Mike? You're too real for them. Nobody knows what to do with someone who just made an honest mistake anymore. Everything has to be a statement, a cause, a movement." "I just want my job back," Mike said quietly. "I just want my normal life back." Maria put her arm around him. "Maybe this is an opportunity. Maybe—" She was cut off by the sound of breaking glass downstairs. Joey was moving before anyone else could react, hand on his weapon as he rushed down the stairs. "Police! Everyone stay where you are." Mike and Maria followed despite Joey's command, leaving Emma safe in her room. In the living room, a brick lay among shattered glass from their front window. Wrapped around it was a piece of paper with a message scrawled in angry red letters. "Trump 2024. "That's it," Joey said, already on his radio calling for backup. "You're not staying here tonight. Pack some bags, you're coming to my place." As Maria rushed to pack overnight bags, and Emma complained about missing school tomorrow, Mike stood looking at the brick on his living room floor. 15 years of selling luxury cars had taught him to read people, to understand their motivations. But this senseless anger from strangers who didn't know him, didn't know his family, didn't know anything except a 10-second video clip. This he couldn't understand. His phone buzzed one more time. A text from David. "Board meeting moved up to tonight. Emergency session. I'll call you as soon as it's over." Mike picked up the brick, feeling its weight in his hand. Such a small thing to cause so much chaos. Just like one laugh in a luxury car dealership on what should have been just another Tuesday morning. "Mike," Maria called from upstairs, "do you want to pack your blue suit? Just in case. Just in case they fired him. Just in case he had to go on job interviews. Just in case he had to appear in court. Just in case this nightmare got even worse." "Yeah," he called back. "Pack the blue one, and the red tie." Because if there was one thing Mike Ramirez knew, it was that you always had to look your best when everything was falling apart. Joey's apartment in Astoria wasn't large, but it felt like a fortress compared to their suddenly vulnerable home. Mike sat at the kitchen counter, scrolling through his phone despite Maria's protests. Emma had finally fallen asleep on the pull-out couch, exhausted from the day's drama. "I still think you should turn that thing off," Maria said, placing a cup of chamomile tea in front of him. "Nothing good can come from watching this train wreck in real time." Mike couldn't look away from his screen. Number "Dealership Gate" was trending nationwide. Someone had already made a remix of his laugh set to dance music. Late-night comedy shows were working it into their monologues. "Stephen Colbert just did 5 minutes on me," he said numbly. "Stephen Colbert knows who I am. How is this real?" Joey emerged from his bedroom in his NYPD sweats. "You're famous, hermano. How's it feel?" "Like a nightmare." Mike put his phone down and rubbed his eyes. David still hasn't called about the board meeting. As if summoned by his words, Mike's phone lit up with David's number. He grabbed it so quickly he almost knocked over his tea. "David?" "Mike." David's voice was heavy. "The board meeting just ended. It went longer than expected." Mike's heart pounded. "Just tell me, am I fired?" "Number not yet anyway." David sighed. "But it's complicated. The board is split. Half of them want to cut ties immediately, avoid the controversy. The other half, well, you've got some surprising supporters." "What does that mean?" It means our biggest clients have been calling all day. Remember Mr. Rothschild, the guy who buys a new S-Class every year? He threatened to take his business to BMW if we fire you. And he's not the only one. Mike leaned back in his chair, processing this information. So what happens now? Now we wait. You're suspended with pay for 2 weeks while we conduct an internal review. It's corporate speak for, let's see if this blows over. But Mike. David paused. The Trump family isn't letting this go. Their lawyers are serious about the lawsuit. Over a laugh? David, come on. In their words, it's about pattern of disrespect and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Look, just stay quiet, okay? Let our lawyers handle it. And Mike, turn on your television. You might want to see this. Mike grabbed Joey's remote and flipped to the news. His own face filled the screen, a still from the security camera footage. The chyron below read, Dealership Drama, Class Warfare or Honest Mistake. A panel of experts was debating his laugh like it was a matter of national security. Clearly, this was a calculated act of political protest, one commentator was saying. The timing, the location. Oh, please, another interrupted. Have you ever worked retail? This is what happens when entitled customers. Mike muted the television. They're analyzing my laugh like it's the Zapruder film. Maria took the remote and turned off the television. Enough, you need to sleep. Tomorrow's going to be another long day. But sleep proved impossible. Mike lay on Joey's spare air mattress, staring at the ceiling while Maria breathed softly beside him. His phone kept buzzing with notifications, despite being set to Do Not Disturb. Around 3 a.m. he gave up and checked his email. There were hundreds of messages, support from strangers, death threats from strangers, job offers from competing dealerships, interview requests from every major network. And one email that made his blood run cold, from Eric Trump's personal assistant. Mr. Ramirez, this situation could have been resolved with a simple apology. Instead, you've chosen to turn it into a media circus. Mr. Trump is prepared to pursue all available legal remedies unless you issue a public apology and resignation by noon tomorrow. Consider your options carefully. Mike forwarded the email to David, then tried calling him despite the hour. To his surprise, David answered on the second ring. You got it too? David asked without preamble. You're awake? Haven't slept. The corporate PR team is in crisis mode. We've got people planning protests outside the dealership tomorrow on both sides. The police are involved. It's a mess, Mike. Mike thought about the brick through his window. What should I do? Nothing. That's an order. Don't respond. Don't apologize. Don't resign. Let our lawyers handle it. David paused. But Mike, be careful tomorrow. These things have a way of escalating. Morning came too quickly. Joey had already left for his shift, but not before stationing a patrol car outside his building, just in case. Emma was glued to her phone at the breakfast table, providing running commentary on her father's viral fame. Dad, you're a meme. Look, someone put your laugh over that scene from Joker. Emma, Maria warned. What did we say about? She was interrupted by a knock at the door. They all froze, remembering the brick from last night. Mike moved to answer it, but Maria grabbed his arm. Let me check first. She peeked through the peephole, then relaxed. It's Lisa from the dealership. Lisa burst in as soon as the door opened, still wearing yesterday's work clothes. Mike, have you seen it? Have you seen what they're doing? Seen what? Mike asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Lisa thrust her tablet at him. The dealership's Google reviews page was open, showing hundreds of new reviews. But instead of the expected flood of 1-star ratings, they were almost all 5 stars. Your customers are fighting back, Lisa explained. They're all leaving reviews about times you helped them, went above and beyond. Mr. Peterson wrote 3 paragraphs about how you spent 2 hours helping his daughter learn about car maintenance before she left for college. Mike scrolled through the reviews, recognizing name after name. Customers he'd helped over the years, people whose stories he remembered, whose kids he'd watched grow up through photos on their phones while they waited for paperwork. This is why the board split, Lisa continued. You've got 15 years of customer loyalty backing you up. That's hard to ignore, even with the Trumps breathing down their necks. Maria read over Mike's shoulder. Look at this one. Mr. Ramirez helped me buy my first car after my divorce. He didn't just sell me a car, he helped me rebuild my confidence. Mike, you never told me about her. Mrs. Goldstein, Mike said softly. She was scared to make such a big purchase on her own. We spent weeks looking at different options, making sure she felt comfortable with every decision. Emma jumped up from the table. Dad, you're trending again. But, oh, what now? Mike didn't think he could take any more surprises. Eric Trump just tweeted. It's not nice. Mike took Emma's phone. The tweet was short but brutal. Sad to see the radical left defending disrespect and mockery. This is what they think of hard-working Americans who succeed. Time to take our country back. Number dealership gate. Hard-working Americans? Maria exploded. You've worked 6 days a week for 15 years. You've never taken a sick day. You missed your own birthday party last year because a customer needed help with their car. It doesn't matter, Mike said quietly. This was never about me. I'm just convenient. A symbol for whatever people want to see. Lisa's phone rang. She answered it, then went pale. Mike, you need to see what's happening at the dealership. She pulled up a live news feed. The scene outside Manhattan Motors was chaos. Protesters filled the sidewalk on both sides of the entrance, one group wearing MAGA hats and carrying signs demanding Mike's firing, the other group holding hastily made posters supporting him. Police barriers separated the two groups, but the tension was visible even through the screen. David called an emergency staff meeting, Lisa said. He wants everyone there in an hour, including you, Mike. Me? But I'm suspended. He says it's important. The board made some kind of decision this morning. Mike looked at Maria, who was already heading to Joey's spare room where they'd hung his blue suit. Go, she said. But you're not going alone. I'm coming too, Emma declared. Absolutely not. Both parents said in unison. But Dad. Emma. Mike knelt in front of his daughter. I need you to understand something. This isn't a game or a fun social media moment. This is our life. Real people are angry enough to throw bricks through windows. I need you safe, please. Emma's lower lip trembled, but she nodded. 45 minutes later, Mike sat in Lisa's car as they approached the dealership. Maria had wanted to come, but someone needed to stay with Emma. The crowd outside Manhattan Motors had grown even larger. Back entrance? Lisa suggested. Mike shook his head. Number, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm not sneaking around. You're either very brave or very stupid, Lisa muttered, but she pulled up to the main entrance anyway. The shouts started as soon as Mike stepped out of the car. From one side, working class hero. Stand up to the elite. From the other, you're fired. Apologize to Trump. Mike kept his head high as he walked through the chaos, Lisa close behind him. Security met them at the door, creating a path through the protesters. Inside, the showroom was eerily empty. No customers, just worried-looking employees gathered in small groups. David led Mike and Lisa into the conference room. The entire sales team was already there, along with representatives from corporate wearing expressions that could have been carved from stone. A large television on the wall displayed a video feed with more executives joining remotely. Before we start, David said, closing the door, I want to make something clear. Everything said in this room stays in this room. No social media, no text to friends, nothing. Understood? Everyone nodded. Mike took his usual seat out of habit, then wondered if he should have remained standing given his suspended status. Mr. Ramirez, one of the corporate executives, began. A nameplate identified her as Catherine Walsh, VP of Operations. We've been monitoring this situation closely. The board spent all night in emergency sessions discussing various options. Mike's throat felt dry. I appreciate the board's attention to. Please, she held up a hand. Let me finish. This morning we received 3 separate communications. First, a letter from Eric Trump's legal team, threatening a lawsuit not just against you personally, but against the dealership for, quote, fostering an environment of disrespect and political discrimination. Murmurs filled the room. Catherine continued. Second, we received a petition signed by over 200 of our most valuable clients, threatening to take their business elsewhere if we, quote, cave to political pressure and fire a dedicated employee over an honest mistake. Mike glanced at Lisa, who gave him a subtle thumbs up under the table. And third, Catherine's voice took on a different tone. We received this. She pressed a button on her laptop. The television screen changed to show a social media post from Donald Trump himself. Disgraceful treatment of my son Eric at failing Manhattan Motors. Woke car salesmen think they can mock success? Time for patriots to show them what we think. Beat them in the market. Number Dealership Gate. Number MAGA. 2024. The room fell silent. Mike felt the weight of every eye on him. Our stock is down 12%, Catherine said quietly. We've had 3 major corporate partners call about reconsidering our relationship. The press is camped outside every one of our dealerships nationwide. Mr. Ramirez, you've become a symbol in a culture war we want no part of. I never meant, Mike started. Your intentions are irrelevant now, she cut him off. This is about damage control. David cleared his throat. Catherine, if I may. Mike's been with us 15 years. His customer satisfaction ratings are impressive, she acknowledged. Which is why this is complicated. The board is deadlocked. Half want to terminate immediately, make a public apology to the Trump family, and hope this blows over. The other half. She was interrupted by a commotion outside. Through the conference room's glass walls, they could see the protesters had somehow gotten past security. They were flooding into the showroom. Signs raised. Phones recording everything. Lock the doors, David commanded. Security rushed to secure the conference room as chaos erupted in the showroom. This is exactly what we were afraid of, Catherine said, watching as protesters from both sides faced off between the luxury vehicles. Every minute this continues, we risk. She was cut off by the sound of breaking glass. Someone had thrown something, Mike couldn't see what, and shattered the windshield of a brand new S-Class. Oh God, Sarah whispered. That car costs more than my house. Mike stood up. Let me talk to them. Absolutely not, Catherine snapped. Security will handle this. Security's outnumbered, Mike pointed out. And those people out there? They're here because of me. Let me try to calm things down. Mike? Lisa grabbed his arm. Don't be stupid. Some of those people want to hurt you. And some of them think they're helping me, Mike replied. But none of them know me, or what really happened. Maybe it's time they did. Before anyone could stop him, Mike walked to the conference room door. A security guard tried to block his path, but David called him off with a sharp gesture. Mike, David said quietly, whatever you're thinking of doing. Trust me, Mike replied, though he wasn't sure he trusted himself. The noise hit him like a wall as he stepped into the showroom. Angry voices bounced off marble floors and glass windows, creating a cacophony of rage. Phone cameras turned toward him like weapons. Hey, he shouted, but his voice was lost in the chaos. Mike looked around, then climbed onto the hood of a nearby display car. The security team moved to stop him, but David waved them back. Hey, Mike shouted again, louder this time. Gradually, the noise died down as people realized who he was. My name is Mike Ramirez, he began, his voice carrying in the sudden quiet. And I'm the guy who laughed at Eric Trump. More phones came up, recording. Mike could practically feel the social media storm brewing. I've worked here for 15 years, he continued. I've sold cars to everyone, Democrats, Republicans, independents, people who don't care about politics at all. I've never asked about anyone's political views because it doesn't matter. In this showroom, everyone gets treated with the same respect. He paused, looking at the faces in the crowd. Some angry, some supportive, all strangers who thought they knew his story. 2 days ago, I laughed at a customer because I thought he was pretending to be someone he wasn't. It wasn't political. It wasn't a statement. It was just a mistake, a human mistake. You disrespected the president's son, someone shouted. You stood up to privilege, someone else countered. Mike held up his hands. I'm not a symbol. I'm not a hero or a villain. I'm just a car salesman trying to support my family. And right now, you're destroying my workplace. You're putting my coworkers' jobs at risk. You're scaring away customers who have nothing to do with any of this. He gestured at the damaged S-Class. Look at what you're doing. Is this justice? Is this what anyone wants? The crowd had grown quieter. Some people lowering their signs. If you support me, thank you. But please, go home. If you're angry at me, I understand. But this isn't the way to show it. This place, these people, they're not your enemies or your allies. They're just people trying to do their jobs. Security had managed to position themselves near the exits. Slowly, people began to move toward the doors. Some still shouted, some still filmed, but the energy had changed. Mike climbed down from the car, his legs shaking slightly. David appeared at his side. "That was either the bravest or the stupidest thing I've ever seen," David said quietly. "Did I just make things worse? I don't know. But—" David nodded toward the conference room, where Catherine and the other executives were watching. "I think you just changed some minds." As the last protesters were escorted out, Mike's phone buzzed. It was Emma. "Dad, you're trending again. But this time, I think it's good." 3 days had passed since Mike's impromptu speech in the showroom. He sat in his living room, finally back home after the police had deemed it safe to return. The broken window was boarded up, waiting for replacement glass, but otherwise, life was trying its best to return to normal. "Dad," Emma called from the kitchen, "you've got to see this. They're talking about you on The View." "No more television," Maria said firmly, taking the remote. "No more social media. No more anything until we hear from David about the board's final decision." As if on cue, Mike's phone rang. David's number. "Hey," Mike answered, trying to keep his voice steady. "Any news?" "You could say that," David replied. "How fast can you get to the dealership?" Mike glanced at his watch. 20 minutes, maybe? Is this good news or bad news?" "It's news. Just get here. Use the back entrance. There are still some reporters hanging around." Maria watched his face as he hung up. "Well?" "I need to go in." David wouldn't say why. "I'm coming with you," Maria declared. It wasn't a question. "Me too," Emma jumped up. "Nice try," Maria said. "You've already missed enough school this week. Your aunt's coming to stay with you." The drive to Manhattan Motors felt surreal. The streets were the same as they'd always been, but everything felt different. Mike kept catching glimpses of his face in store windows, newspapers displayed at newsstands, his showroom speech playing on TVs and shop windows. "It's strange," he said as they waited at a red light. "All these years, I wanted to make my mark on the world. Do something meaningful, you know? And all it took was one stupid laugh." Maria squeezed his hand. "Maybe this is meaningful, just not in the way you expected." The dealership's backlot was quieter than usual. As they parked, Mike noticed something odd. The service entrance was unusually busy, with multiple car carriers arriving and departing. Inside, the atmosphere was electric. Staff members hurried back and forth, many talking on phones or carrying paperwork. The damaged S-Class had been removed from the showroom floor, and everything gleamed as if nothing had ever happened. Lisa intercepted them before they could reach David's office. "Mike, thank God you're here. You're not going to believe this." "Believe what? What's going on?" "We're having the biggest sales week in dealership history." Lisa grinned. "People are coming from other states to buy cars from that dealership where the guy laughed at Eric Trump. Some are even asking specifically for cars from the showroom where it happened." Mike stared at her. "You're joking." "Nope. And get this. Remember Mr. Peterson? The guy who threatened to take his business elsewhere if they fired you? He just ordered 3 new G-Wagons. Said he's giving them to his kids for Christmas." "3 G-Wagons?" Maria whispered. "That's over $500,000 in commissions," Lisa finished. "And he's not the only one. We've had more G-Wagon orders in the past 3 days than we usually get in 6 months." Before Mike could process this, David emerged from his office. "Mike, good. You're here. We need you in the conference room." "David, what's going on? Lisa was just telling me—" "All will be explained." David cut him off, but Mike caught the hint of a smile. "Maria, you should come too." The conference room was packed. The corporate executives were back, including Catherine Walsh. But their stone faces had been replaced with something that looked almost like amusement. The television screen showed even more remote participants than before. "Mr. Ramirez," Catherine began once everyone was seated, "we've had some interesting developments." She gestured to one of her colleagues, who distributed papers around the table. Mike looked down at what appeared to be social media analytics reports. "Your showroom speech has gone viral," Catherine continued. Not just viral, it's become what the marketing team calls a cultural moment. The video has been viewed over 50 million times. Public sentiment has shifted dramatically in your favor. Another executive chimed in. The terms authentic, genuine, and real appear in over 80% of social media discussions about the incident. You've become something of a folk hero, the everyday man who reminded everyone that not everything has to be political. But more importantly, Catherine added, our sales numbers have exploded. Not just here, but across all our dealerships. Your speech about treating everyone with respect, regardless of politics? It resonated strongly. David leaned forward. Mike, people are calling from all over the country. They want to buy cars from us because of how you handled this situation. The board had to call an emergency session just to discuss inventory allocation. Mike's head was spinning. What about the lawsuit, the Trump family? Catherine's smile turned slightly predatory. Ah, yes, about that. Their lawyers contacted us this morning. It seems they've decided to. What was the phrase? Pursue other priorities at this time. They backed down? Maria asked incredulously. Let's just say, Catherine replied, that pursuing legal action against someone who's become a symbol of nonpartisan decency and authenticity wasn't polling well, especially in an election year. She slid another document across the table. Mike picked it up, then nearly dropped it when he saw what it was. This is a promotion offer, he said quietly. Regional Sales Director, Catherine confirmed, with a significant salary increase and full college tuition coverage for Emma as part of the benefits package. Mike looked at Maria, who had tears in her eyes. But, he turned back to Catherine, why? 3 days ago, you were ready to fire me. 3 days ago, you were a liability, she answered frankly. Now, you're an asset. Your speech about treating everyone with respect regardless of politics? That's exactly the message our brand needs right now. The board thinks you could be the face of our new corporate culture initiative. I don't want to be a face, Mike protested. I just want to sell cars. And you will, David assured him. But let's be honest, you've always been about more than just selling cars. You build relationships. You treat people like people, not walking dollar signs. That's what went viral, Mike. Not the laugh, the humanity. Mike looked down at the contract again. The salary figure made his eyes water. There is one condition, Catherine added. We need you to make a short statement. Nothing political, just a simple acknowledgement that while the initial incident was a misunderstanding, you've learned valuable lessons about judgment and respect. And Eric Trump? Mike asked. What about him? His office sent over a prepared statement this morning. They're characterizing this as a learning opportunity for everyone involved and expressing hope that we can all move forward in a spirit of mutual respect. Mike couldn't help it, he laughed, not mockingly this time, but at the sheer absurdity of it all. There's that famous laugh, Lisa quipped from across the table, and suddenly everyone was laughing, the tension of the past few days finally breaking. So, David said once the laughter had died down, what do you say? Ready to make history again? This time on purpose? Mike looked at Maria, who nodded encouragingly. He thought about Emma's college dreams, about his customers who had stood by him, about the strange and winding path that had led him here. On one condition, he said, I want my old office back, the one by the G-Wagons. Done, David grinned, though I should warn you, we've had to rope it off. Tourists keep trying to take selfies there. As the meeting wrapped up and people began to file out, Mike's phone buzzed one last time. It was Emma. Dad, you're trending again. This time, he wasn't afraid to look. The hashtag made him smile. Number Bay like Ramirez, treating everyone with respect, one laugh at a time. Ready to go home? Maria asked, squeezing his hand. Mike looked around the showroom. At the spot where he'd laughed, at the car he'd stood on to make his speech, at the place that had been his home away from home for 15 years. Actually, he said, I think I'm ready to sell some cars. Now? Maria raised an eyebrow. After everything that's happened? Mike straightened his tie, the red one that had started this whole adventure. Well, according to Lisa, we've got customers coming from other states. Wouldn't want to disappoint them, would we? As if on cue, the front doors opened, and a couple walked in. Phones raised to capture the now famous showroom. Mike smiled his genuine professional smile, the one that had served him well for 15 years. "Welcome to Manhattan Motors," he said. "I'm Mike Ramirez. How can I help you today?" The couple's eyes widened with recognition. Are you the Mike Ramirez?" Mike laughed, fearlessly this time. "Yes, I am. Now, what kind of car were you interested in?" As he led them toward the vehicles, Mike caught his reflection in a car window. He was still the same person he'd been a week ago, just a car salesman trying to support his family. But somehow, impossibly, that had turned out to be exactly what the world needed. Behind him, David watched with a smile as Mike launched into his familiar sales routine. "Some things never change," he murmured. "Thank God for that," Maria replied, watching her husband do what he did best, treating people like people, one sale at a time. 6 months later, the laugh heard round the world, as social media had dubbed it, was still having ripple effects. Mike's new position as regional sales director had brought unexpected challenges and rewards. His training seminars on authentic customer service had become mandatory across all dealerships in the network. Though he still insisted on personally handling sales at least 2 days a week, the famous spot where he'd laughed now had a small, tasteful plaque. "Where authenticity met opportunity, September 2025. It had become something of a tourist attraction, with people regularly stopping by to take photos. Emma had started her freshman year at NYU, her tuition fully covered by Mike's new benefits package. She'd written her college application essay about the incident, titled, "When My Dad's Laugh Changed Our Lives." The admissions officer later told her it was one of the most genuine pieces they'd read that year. Maria's bakery had benefited from the attention too, though she steadfastly refused to name any pastries after the incident, despite customer requests for Trump trumpets or laugh-out-loud lemon bars. One quiet evening, as Mike was finishing up paperwork in his office, a familiar face appeared in his doorway. "Got a minute?" Lisa asked, holding 2 cups of coffee from Giovanni's. "For you? Always." Mike gestured to the chair across from his desk. "What's on your mind? Did you see who's coming to the charity gala next month?" She handed him the guest list with a knowing smile. Mike scanned the names, then stopped at one in particular. "Eric Trump? You're kidding." "Nope. Apparently it was his idea. Something about showing unity in divided times or whatever his PR team came up with." Mike leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. "Life's funny sometimes, isn't it?" "Speaking of funny," Lisa grinned. "Have you seen the new training video they're making? They want to recreate the laugh incident with actors." "Please tell me you're joking." "Wish I was. Corporate thinks it's a perfect example of turning conflict into opportunity. They're calling it the power of authentic connection." Mike groaned. "What happened to just selling cars?" "You're more than that now, Mike. You're a brand. A symbol." "Eh?" "Stop," he held up his hand. "I'm still just a guy who laughed at the wrong person on the right day." Lisa's expression turned serious. "You know what I think? I think you laughed at exactly the right person on exactly the right day. Sometimes the world needs a reminder that it's okay to be human." Through his office window, Mike could see a young salesman helping an elderly couple with a car. The salesman was taking his time, listening patiently, treating them with genuine respect, just like Mike had taught him. "Maybe you're right," Mike admitted. "But don't let it go to your head. We've still got sales targets to meet." "Always the salesman." Lisa laughed, standing to leave. "Oh, by the way, Emma stopped by the showroom yesterday. Said she needed to show her college friends where it happened." Mike smiled. "What did she tell them?" "That her dad taught her the most important lesson of all, that sometimes the best response to life is just to laugh." After Lisa left, Mike walked out to the showroom floor. The evening sun streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the polished cars. A few customers were still browsing, some taking selfies by the plaque, others actually interested in making purchases. His phone buzzed, a text from Maria. "Don't forget we're having dinner with the Petersons tonight. He wants to talk about ordering another G-Wagon." Mike smiled, remembering that first laugh that had started it all. He'd learned a lot since then, about people, about politics, about what really matters in life. But mostly, he'd learned that sometimes the most human response is the right one, even if it gets you in trouble first. A young man in an ill-fitting suit walked through the front doors, trying too hard to look important. For a moment, Mike felt a flash of déjà vu. Then he smiled, straightened his tie, and walked forward to greet his next customer. After all, in this business, you never knew when another laugh might change everything.